Good afternoon. Welcome to the TheoTRADE afternoon video. I'm Blake Young. Today is August 24th, 2023, and today we're going to ask the question, did Nvidia call the peak of the AI craze? To start this discussion, we will begin with the QQQ, or the Nasdaq Index ETF, where the Nasdaq is very heavy laden into tech sector. This would make a lot of sense to see how Nvidia's influence on the Qs has played out, and maybe what we're seeing now after earnings have passed. Starting out with the Qs, we can look at this pullback. We can see the little bit of a reversal through here, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, and this rally through here that is being seen with an engulfing, huge gap up, close down, super candle. That in and of itself, from a technical image, would be an engulfing candle and the beginning or a return to a downtrend right through here from the Nasdaq, purely from technicals. But we know that it was being driven by Nvidia. So looking at Nvidia and the mathematical correlation, I'm a big fan of looking at the math, not just looking at the chart and saying, yeah, that feels about right. But look at the correlation. This is the last year from 100% correlated to 100% inversely correlated. I had to zoom in so you can see the difference there. And you can see the entire year, the Nasdaq has had a positive correlation except for maybe 5 days to Nvidia, or Nvidia to the Nasdaq. The question is the cart before the horse, horse before the cart? We just know that Nvidia has had maybe an unreasonable influence on this large index. As we're looking at Nvidia's moving higher and lower and the climb that we saw over the last couple of weeks as Nvidia has reached record highs, just be aware that the correlation mathematically shows that it's been consistent, and throughout the year, only maybe 5 days out of 270 days have we seen a non-correlated market. We've seen a correlation as high as 98% correlation between Nvidia and the Qs. If we look at Nvidia, the rally that we saw ahead of the earnings yesterday, we can see this push higher, and again, this will be the correlation at 1. It just doesn't know how to read it very well. But you can see the higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows continue to move up and even reaching a record high today. Earnings came out. Earnings beat expectation. You can see that we were expected to come in roughly at about $1.80. It came in at $2.70. Record highs in price, but a gap up, close down is considered an exhaustion gap. Gap up, close down is considered an exhaustion gap. And the question was this the peak of Nvidia? And is this confirmation that the AI craze peak is done? That Nvidia can no longer lift the markets higher? Before we make that assumption, we want to look at some other highly correlated AI stocks, including Google and Microsoft and Amazon. But let's look at some specifics such as Symbotic, SYM. A lot of AI in here. Great year, running from $8 all the way to $64, 800% increase. And then this massive reversal. But notice the peak happened on earnings. Earnings spiked the stock all the way up. And then we've just melted away, melted away, melted away. We've cleared the lows. We've cleared the lows of earnings and the previous lows. And here we are, fairly weak. But before we leave there, just as a reminder, the correlation was still very high. If I zoom into 1 and -1 so you can get the picture, anything in the yellow is a positive correlation. Now, not nearly as correlated as we saw in the Qs, but we can still see a very significant amount of correlation between Nvidia and Symbotic. So as we're looking at this move through here, we already reversed. We already created lower lows after creating an expansion pattern. If you go back and watch my session today in the main room, we talk a little bit about expansion patterns and consolidations to define trends, and this is setting up for a bearish trend. If we look at AI, which is C3, we'll see a very similar situation where we have a very high correlation, huge amount of the year, closer to what we already saw in the Qs, where we only have a few days during the last year that there wasn't a very positive correlation. Now, we've broken down a little bit now, but notice AI already created a peak, or I should say C3 AI, created a peak, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. And today, following Nvidia failing to maintain its strength, we're liquidating and we put in a new low, taking us all the way back into May. already seeing a downtrend, a clear downtrend established, and the correlation have remained relatively high. Now, again, a little disruption here does not mean that the correlation won't return to normal. If today's gap up and close down is a reversal, like Don talked about yesterday in his video, if this is the reversal of the market, as Don talked about in Nvidia, then AI is going to continue, C3.ai is going to continue to fall back to its next support level, which will likely be near 20, if not all the way down to about 17. So I'm looking at about a 30 to 40% drop in C3. And I keep saying AI, but that's the symbol. I don't want to confuse that with artificial intelligence, which is what we're talking about being correlated to Nvidia. We can take a look at Pro or Pros Holdings. Another lower high, lower low, another very high correlation. I do want to get to the big players. So let's do ISRG and ATS really quick. ISRG has already reversed its pattern again at their earnings. So all these stocks that were released earlier, tying directly to AI and AI technology, they all reversed at their earnings. They had already started falling and collapsing underneath. Already saw the pressure creating lower highs, lower lows. The correlations were high with Nvidia, but we've already seen the liquidation and the reversal of the pattern, erasing not just a couple of days, but a couple of months and a couple of years. In some cases, we're seeing erasing key support and resistance levels for days, weeks, months, quarters, and we may be setting up for those years as we drop to new lows, such as we already saw in ATS. Now, ATS hasn't been around for a year, but you can see we peaked out here, reversed lower highs, lower lows, and continue to slide. But let's go over and look at Google, Microsoft, and Adobe, Amazon, all the others that have tight correlations with Nvidia. We zoom into one and -1 again, just so you can see that high correlation between Google. Google gapped up following Nvidia today. Gapped up, closed down, but the difference here, it's not just an exhaustion gap. We didn't only fill the gap on Google. We've erased almost all of yesterday. Nvidia reversed, but Google has reversed and pushed through the previous gap, filled the gap, and is showing signs of a piercing line and reversal here. Take a look at Microsoft. Microsoft already reversed, created that widening pattern we talked about in today's session, higher highs, lower lows, and then with today's move, we've gapped up, closed down, engulfed the previous candle, actually engulfed the previous 2 weeks almost, still remaining high at 47% correlation to Nvidia, and we created an engulfing pattern, which is likely the lower high. So the trend can continue for Microsoft, and we might see Microsoft drift back down to 308, 300, and even all the way down to 274. A drop to 274, now we're talking about a 15% drop in Microsoft. Take a look at Adobe. As we look at Adobe, engulfing candle again, could be the lower highs, high correlation, putting the pressure on to the downside after reaching its peak a couple of weeks ago. The last one we will look at is Amazon before we go look at Nvidia for its intraday charts. Amazon created lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and an engulfing candle. This engulfing candle is traded all the way through the low of the previous day. The correlation did break about last week, but the year still looks very correlated from the way I see it. From a mathematical perspective, we had very few days that we did not have a positive correlation with Nvidia to Amazon. Now, Amazon has fallen down. It's created this lower high, lower low. I've been watching this longer-term trend, but a break below this trend line, this channel, not only should see another 9-point move lower, but that could get us through these levels through here. And a 9-point move lower here would likely see us come back to about 113 and maybe even down to 102. So the lift that has been going on for Amazon and Symbotic and Microsoft and Google and everything that's had that tight correlation to Nvidia, it reminds me a lot of the end scene of Disney's Aladdin. I don't know if you remember the end scene or one of the end scenes of Disney's Aladdin, when Jafar becomes a genie. But he doesn't realize that he is coupled to or imprisoned by the lamp. So he's there, and I imagine this like Nvidia being Jafar, thinking it is the genie. It is rising. It is powerful. All the cosmic powers of the universe. Pushing to 502, actually pushing to 520 something overnight, but pushing all the way up to this level, thinking it is all powerful, indestructible, beating expectations, and then all the power that it has is coupled and linked to the demand of AI and the growth of the companies that can spend money on Nvidia software. As we're looking at this move, it just like the movie, the genie, or Jafar as the genie, thinks that it's all powerful, and then it realizes that it's trapped. All the cosmic power, but an itty bitty tiny living space. And he gets pulled down and dragged down by the lamp, dragged down by the market, dragged down by the expectations. And so we see that the expectations can't be held to have all that power, but reality is it could fade. And if Nvidia cannot hold it up, if it's not powerful enough, it's going to get sucked back into the lamp. And that genie, that magic that is AI, that hype that is AI, the AI craze, maybe just reached its peak. If we look at the intraday again, the reversal that Don has been looking for, you can see we created lower highs, lower lows, and reversed through here. From the intraday perspective, we don't need to see the correlation to itself. So let's get rid of that. But we can see we went to 520 in the overnight, reverse, created lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. Unless we get above 490, this is the beginning of a micro trend, lower highs, lower lows, that could continue back to these lows near 450. Now to go from 520 to 450, that is a sizable drop. If we go back to the weeklies, if we go back to 450, that brings us back inside this previous pattern. This becomes an expansion. And the expansion does set up for looking for a new trend, which could be the reversal. I'm not necessarily looking to play Nvidia short at this point. I think there's still a lot of hype, a lot of volatility, but what I am looking for is that this stock, this genie, is going to be tethered by the lamp. And the lamp sits on the ground. The lamp is an inanimate object. So what I'm expecting is I'm expecting this to hold the Nasdaq down. This could be a very ugly looking head and shoulders. It could be a reversal that could break through that support level. We could be looking at another continuation lower. And if we're looking for this continuation lower, falling back to some key levels, even down to 320, that could be a 12% drop. It's not just a 12% drop, it's a 12% drop off of the recent highs, which will put us closer to a 20% or full bear market. What are some of the clues and hints? Well, today is the first clue and hint. We've engulfed the candle. Earlier today, we had not made a lower low. We'd created a gap up, closed down, which was a piercing line, but the Qs have now created higher highs, lower lows. This expansion has wiped out the buyers. A widening candle says the trend that got you here, which is only a 4-day, 5-day trend, is over. That means the longer term trend, lower highs, lower lows through here, is back in play. I would be watching for this trend to continue lower on the Qs and the rest of the market, as the tech sector has been lifting the rest of the market. And I'd be watching for either this trend to continue and reverse, or we could go off the gap, but I just don't think the gap is worth it here. I think we anchor off the closes, and we're looking for this to continue lower. If it just goes back to retest its lows, like we said, about 350, if it breaks through this channel to the downside, it's an acceleration of the downtrend, and that's another 16 points. If we look at this as a continuation through here, it would have to see a significant acceleration, but it is possible. And if a breakthrough 350 sees another 16-point drop plus some for time, that really could bring us down into that 320, 325 level. Additionally, we have seen signs of weakness in the economy while the rates are remaining high. We saw durable goods orders come in at -5% versus expected -4%. Durable goods order is the lowest number durable goods have been at since the 2020 pandemic lockdown, and prior to that, it takes us all the way back to 2017. So this is the worst number for durable goods orders since 2017. And from there, we go back even further. And the number we're talking about takes us all the way back to 2014. And a lot of people don't remember that 2014 saw a 25 to 30% correction in the small caps and a 15 to 20% correction in equities. So there are some signs of weakness that we're seeing in conjunction with this. And if Nvidia is not going to lift the market, again, I'm not saying that Nvidia is a great short. I'm saying that Nvidia is not going to be lifting the market anymore. And there's a better chance that it gets sucked down with the rest of the market as we're already in a downtrend and continuing the downtrend with today's price action. I hope that is helpful, at least maybe gives you some perspective to look at from the longer term as well as the correlated stocks in this AI sector, in this AI crazed world. And as we're watching, don't forget to watch for those confirmations like I talked about in the main room today, for those continuations, those correlations, because it appears that the lift is gone. The air is out of the balloon, possibly. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for watching.